I want to bring up Jessica Pothering, my colleague, who's been doing, I think, a stellar job on covering the beat. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, David.
And let's say a quick hello to our guests as well. Kate Finn, First Peoples Worldwide. Terrific report. Thank you so much for all your help on this. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
And Brett Isaac from Navajo Power. Brett, welcome.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
You know, you may have to be called out, so if you have to go, obviously feel free, but we're delighted to have you. Clay Colombe, I hope I said that right, from Siċaŋġu Co. Clay, welcome.
Hi, Clay Colombe. Yeah, I'm the CEO of Siċaŋġu Co. Yes.
Okay, I got them both wrong. I apologize for that. And Chrystel Cornelius from Oweesta Corp. Welcome, Chrystel.
Hello, good to see you all.
Have a brief welcome from John MacArthur Foundation as a partner in our catalytic capital coverage, and John's been a terrific partner, so welcome, John.
Thanks, David. Thanks so much for having us here today. Really happy to be here in community with you and all the agents of impact that are participating in this call today. I'm zooming in from sweltering Chicago, which is situated on Potawatomi land. And I'll just quickly start by saying how much we really appreciate all that Impact Alpha is doing to spotlight leadership in the field of impact investing. And it's the exceptional quality of your work at Impact Alpha that led MacArthur and our partners with the Catalytic Capital Consortium to support the beat that you've developed around catalytic capital. We're really proud to support this journalism. And like you, we want to clearly note for all the participants in this discussion that this support relationship is in place. The Catalytic Capital Consortium, or C3 as we call it, is an initiative that MacArthur developed in partnership with the Rockefeller Foundation and the Omidyar Network to increase the knowledge, awareness, and use of catalytic capital. It includes MacArthur-led field partnership investments that are intended to be powerful examples of catalytic capital at work, along with synergistic grant making through a pooled vehicle, C3 grant making that's based at New Venture Fund. The research that Kate Finn will discuss today and that she and her partners published in June of this year was supported through our C3 grant making work stream to build the evidence base for catalytic capital. And it was part of a small cohort of 14 research proposals from an exceptionally competitive pool of applicants to study elements of catalytic capital in different sectors, use cases, and regions around the world. We were incredibly excited when we saw this proposal come in to assess the state of and opportunities for catalytic capital in Indian country. And that's because catalytic capital at its core is about addressing capital gaps. And these gaps can relate to many issues, but at its most powerful, catalytic capital attempts to contribute to solutions that address historical inequities. And when you consider the egregious historical treatment of Native communities that persists to this day here in the United States, it's difficult to imagine a more important and stark example of where catalytic capital can help to contribute to these solutions and to support the economic empowerment of Indigenous peoples. This is truly a case where catalytic capital can function as capital that leans towards justice. So the work that you'll hear about today and the leaders you'll hear from represents, in our view, important data, insights, and voices on this critical issue. I personally found this research to be necessary reading for us at MacArthur as we look at ways to further deploy catalytic capital in Indian country. I'm really grateful to the leaders who drove this work, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them in this discussion today.
Terrific. Thank you, John, and thank you for all the support. Jessica, let's bring Kate up. Kate, as John said, this report was stellar. It was a guide to so much good work, and we want to focus this call on sort of very practical, ways to advance catalytic capital in Indian country, on what kind of capital is needed where and from who. But let me start with you with the when, because I think in the report you say the time is now. And I want to kind of get at what is different about now. Why is now the moment? What is ripe for action?
Yeah, thank you so much, David, for the question. And I would be remiss not to acknowledge my co-authors, Janice Stoney and David Lizax in this research, and of course, funded through New Venture Fund. But really, so I'm the director of First Peoples Worldwide. I'm a member of the Osage Nation. And what I get to see every day is this incredible economic landscape in Indian country. I get to see entrepreneurs really building solutions from their communities up, walking the land, understanding where electric is needed, really talking to folks about what kind of nutrition they need day in and day out, talking to tribes about how that needs to be delivered. So I get to see that. And another part of my job, I get to speak to investors every day about Indian country, what's going on in Indian country, what is. So when I say the time is now, what I mean is that Native economic power is here. There are Native entrepreneurs. There is a thriving Native economy happening. And even in a very capital constrained environment, that success is ongoing. And so what I really wanted to do with this report is show that the hindrance that we're seeing is a couple of things. And one of them is just plain economic invisibility. The fact that a lot of the country just doesn't see the successes and the solutions that occur in Indian country. So I wanted to point out that Native economic invisibility, that exists. And what we do in this report is really try and create a pathway through that, because I know that Native solutions there, and there are ways, particularly with creative capital, particularly with catalytic capital, to build new pathways that create new patterns that really do amplify Native solutions.
Terrific. Now let's get kind of to the what and the what you found. A couple things that jumped out at me, and feel free to add to it. One was kind of, I guess you might call it kind of the need for kind of a particular kind or flavor or approach to catalytic capital in Indian country. The second was the development, which, as you say, has been quite dramatic, and a whole set of intermediaries, of lenders and community institutions, Native-led, that are now sort of have grown up over the last number of years. And so those were two of my takeaways, but maybe you could expand on that and add any others.
Absolutely. So kind of two parts to that. And one is the way, the how do we get catalytic capital in, and what does it mean to amplify Native solutions? There's kind of two parts to that. The first is, and the core value of our research, is sovereignty. Making sure that Native entrepreneurs are able to govern all aspects of their entrepreneurial vision. They have governance, they have ownership, their solutions are the ones amplified, and that access to capital or lack of access to capital doesn't hinder those. What we don't want to do is undermine solutions. What we want to do is seed those solutions and elevate those solutions. And so there's a way to do that. And the way that we put forward in the paper, we called Catalytic Capital Plus. And there's a number of different very specific parts of that, but a key component to that is right relationship. So really making sure that the relationship between the investor and the entrepreneur is clear, is transparent, and really provides the entrepreneur with everything that they need to make sure that this capital is going to seed their vision. And so it's really about that right relationship. And one of the cool things you asked me before, what's different now than maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago? Native CDFIs have existed for a long time, and for that whole time. But there are more and more Native intermediaries now who can be that valued, trusted relationship, who can be the conduits for relationship and the conduits for capital in a way that get it to Native entrepreneurs in ways that they can accept it and the ways that they can build their capital stack.
Jessica, you have a question?
Yeah, Kate, I know there wasn't one sort of element to the research that we actually didn't get to talk about much, and I just wanted you to highlight quickly, and that was the data aspect of that and how critical that is in also the broader unlocking of catalytic capital story.
Absolutely. So one of our key findings was to enact data justice. And just to unpack that very quickly, really what I find in Indian country is that when there are really good deals that really do solve for Native entrepreneurs' access and capital needs and really do provide good solutions for the investor, it's as if that deal it's a one-off. It's as if that's the only deal that's been created. And so one of the reasons we really wanted to create this research was to say, there are great things happening in Indian country. There are really good capital flows. There are really good deals. We want to shed light on that. We want transparency there, because when we can share information, when investors can share information, when Native entrepreneurs can share information, that transparency allows everyone to see that these kind of creative capital deals can happen and will happen. And so there's a call here for philanthropy, for investors to share as much information as they can, and really to put all the cards on the table for Native entrepreneurs so that people can see what's available to them in a deal-making structure, what they can do, how they can support their solution with capital instead of changing their solution to access capital.
Awesome. Kate, thanks. I know we're going to come back to you in just a little bit, but now I want to bring in Brett Isaac from Navajo Power. Brett, you guys were featured in one of the case studies in the report, and you and I had a conversation in follow-up to that. And so you founded Navajo Power, I think, really with the view of creating jobs and economic opportunity on the Navajo Nation. Maybe you can give listeners a bit of a quick background on that, but as a starting point for you, I understand that you guys have just reached a pretty big milestone on one of your developments. So I'd also like you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. To everybody, Brett Isaac, founder, executive chairman of Navajo Power. Navajo Power was really created in response to what we saw as the transition coming for energy and economics across, indigenous communities. We're a clean energy developer that's focusing on building utility scale projects across, the country. And we started with the Navajo Nation, but one of the things we wanted to do is create, the injection point for where capital can be deployed and resources can be deployed to realize these projects. Things like the Inflation Reduction Act have really highlighted the need for this work. But, for us, we created this company essentially to provide services and the technical capabilities directly to communities and governments that wanted to see these projects develop in their communities. We also uniquely have a strategy as a company. Starting as a developer, we work on the earlier stage, most underfunded, under-resourced activities that are required for energy development. And we have a co-development deal with a Fortune 500 company that has diligenced our projects, diligenced our company, and we currently have over 1 gigawatt of projects with them under contract, and we have a current development pipeline of 3 gigawatts of solar and storage projects across the Western United States.
Wonderful.
Terrific, Brett. This one of the questions I was going to ask about why the moment is now was both the sort of new opportunities like solar, and also, as you mentioned, federal funding under Inflation Reduction Act and elsewhere. So you're finding that you're able to build Navajo Power now in a way that might not have been possible a few years ago. And
yeah, I mean, we really got started 5 years ago when the conversations were at the very beginning, and we entered at a very opportunistic point because development takes a long period of time and it requires very intensive resources. For us, it was really about trying to catalyze and challenge, there's a lot of support in philanthropic institutions that all have, funding indigenous communities and funding clean energy and climate objectives in their bylines, but they needed a point for that resource to reach these communities to create equity. That's what Navajo Power does, is we do the diligence and the work to make these projects competitive, feasible, and, you know, really competitive in the regions that we're developing them. The federal government is now catching on and doing something similar. But we very early on had an innovative debt facility that Morgan Simon from the Candide Group led, which allowed us to seed the work that we've done to get to this point.
And that was for, just to be clear on the sort of role of that capital, that was pre-development.
Yeah,
the work that is sometimes hard to fund because you don't have a project yet necessarily.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically the pre-development work to take concepts off of the paper and make them investable positions. So we raised this seed $10 million facility, and currently, you know, we're raising a $20 million blended capital facility, a combination of equity, debt, and philanthropic capital. The reason we're raising this current capital is to scale what we learned in that initial, you know, development work on the Navajo Nation and these other tribes. There's a large need in our country to support indigenous communities to get ready to take advantages of things like the Inflation Reduction Act. The Department of Energy Loan Program Office has existed for over a decade, yet has 0 loans issued out in its history. And part of that is because the intermediaries such as Navajo Power didn't exist. You know, there wasn't a place for communities to seek out that initial guidance and capability. And so that's why we felt like we are that intermediary that's necessary. And then we want to grow into creating more equitable and more positions for revenue streams to come back and reach these communities through, you know, the contributions from impact investors alike. We catalyze that capital in unique ways.
I want to come back to those kind of community benefits, but you also mentioned the corporate partner, and I wonder what role in the sort of capital stack is that an offtake partner? Are they committed?
Yes. Well, it's really, these projects take, you know, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars in a pipeline like ours to build out. And so we also need the balance sheet and the expertise to, you know, that's the other thing tribes don't have is, you know, if they want to own these projects, do they have the credit rating? Do they have the financial strategy to get a power purchase agreement to finance long-term, you know, operational O&M deals? Like there's a lot of I guess I'll call them, you know, technological gaps that we need to fill. And part of bringing in that large company in was, one, to help mentor us into those spaces, but the other is to bring that assurance that makes a project competitive, because we're not just competing, you know, in our little small spaces. We're competing against, you know, I guess regional and statewide projects. And so, you know, indigenous communities are playing now in a national, you know, grid. And that's what's really exciting about this, is it makes this, you know, once we're successful, this will open up not just the impact capital, but the commercial capital, because a market will be created, you know, in the wake of what we do.
Great. I have one actual follow-up question for you, Brett, and that was, you know, you and I talked a little bit in prior conversations about how oftentimes the commercial and federal funding that's available for green infrastructure, it doesn't fund sort of the early development and like planning work that will ensure the sorts of equity and community benefits and just transition that you all are trying to pursue. And so I just wanted you to weigh in on what kinds of capital have been helpful to you and were necessary to sort of lay that groundwork.
Yeah, that initial capital, not just in feasibility studies, but beyond that, there are investable things such as interconnection, engineering, and very tangible assets that aren't fundable by the federal programs, you know, in their guidance. And commercial capital views them as, you know, a bit too risky, as do the tribes. The tribes don't have the risk profiles to typically invest into these. So it remains to be an underfunded and under-realized, you know, gap in the financial stack that's required to get these projects to an investable space. So what we do is take that capital, apply it to that position, and you know, keep that just keep creating equity out of these projects, because once they're investable, that's when the commercial capital, that's when the federal capital comes in. Is once you get past a certain stage of development, that pretty much assures that a project is, in line of sight, basically.
Wonderful. Awesome. Brett, thank you for weighing in. I know there's a chance that you might have to jump off, but hopefully you'll be able to hang in. Clay, I want to turn to you now. You head up the Rosebud Economic Development Corporation, and one of the projects profiled in the report and on Impact Alpha was the Woolakota Buffalo Range, which I know that's been a long time vision to reestablish a buffalo herd on the Rosebud Sioux tribal lands. And just going in, I was hoping you could share a little bit with our listeners just about the project.
Yeah, I'm actually just left the headquarters of it here. I had to drive about 20 minutes to the south to get into accept good cell phone range to get on the call here. But yeah, this was, the Lakota people were, a buffalo bison people historically. That was our economy. My predecessor, Weezypaw Little Elk, was really spearheaded, getting the Woolakota Buffalo project going. And, as it has been mentioned, that the funding to, the planning, the feasibility of it was, difficult to get. Our tribe, did not have those resources. Our, Redco, Rosebud Economic Development Corporation, didn't have a ton of cash laying around to do that. So through a partnership specifically with World Wildlife Fund, we were able to get that, make sure, hey, this is a feasible project. We were able to secure a lease of 28,000 acres from the tribe to do this. And, once it was feasible, got that, we were, through partnerships with WWF, NDN Collective, a number of different people able to put together the capital stack to fully fund this project for the first 5 years, which involved, not only acquiring, the herd, which a lot of it was donated, but also, making improvements to the land, miles and miles and miles of fencing, redoing wells. Last year was a really rough winter. We had to invest a lot in snowcats and things to, get out to this. Even, our reservation's pretty remote. Getting to this location from our headquarters takes an hour and a half. I mean, it's not an easy place to get to. But all the a typical bank financing for anything, this thing never would have anywhere. Getting partners that came in, obviously the idea lured them in, but then them coming in, sitting down, listening to, hey, what's going to work for us, helping us figure out what was going to work for us. Again, it's not like we had this business plan ready to go, just needed funded. There was a lot of work needed to be done by our team and others, and helping us, do that, putting us in connection with, people like Turners and whatnot, getting making sure that we plan this thing to be successful was huge. And, it takes those relationships, but I really credit, WWF, people coming in, what's going to, figure out what's going to work for us and then build on that, coming in with a lot of grant funding, forgivable debt, extremely low interest debt. This is, this project's not going to cash flow for 5 years. How do we get through that? In the past, a lot of stuff we got is, hey, we really like that. We'll give you a year's funding to get going on that. Like, okay, so, halfway through your first year, you're just back in fundraising mode, not actually working on the project. So, a lot of, good people, good organizations coming in and working with us as partners definitely got this off the ground.
That's great. You mentioned actually too that the importance of the listening aspect, but also that, it's been a learning journey for you all as well to understand what can be creatively done with capital, right? Like, I think you mentioned, the fact that the project wouldn't have revenues for 5 years, and how some of your lending partners helped you figure out how to design a capital facility that would support that work in the best way possible, right?
Yeah, that was great. I mean, and I come from a finance background, commercial banking, private equity, and it's funny, I kind of got locked into those traditional facilities out there. Like, no, nobody's ever going to go for that. And, you know, some of our partners, like, you guys aren't asking for good enough terms. It's like, okay, you know, well, how about, you know, 1% interest, you know, interest only for 5 years on a 10-year facility, done. Like, you know, so that was, again, really great having the right partners in there. And again, just showing what can be done on these things, you know, so.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let's just stick for a moment on catalytic grants, because often I think the catalytic capital conversation, you know, goes to investments, and it's funny because some of it does come out of foundations like MacArthur and others that historically did grants, but now grants sometimes are overlooked as catalytic capital. And I think it's been key in some of these projects to be able to get like this early money that we're talking about. So just describe how that sort of set you up for success.
Yeah, I mean, without the grants, again, it wouldn't be possible. Again, that's, you know, the riskiest money, as you know, talking about, you know, on the power generation side, you know, same on this, you know, it wasn't a proven concept for us to do, but we had to, you know, make sure that it would work. And, you know, we didn't have the dry powder there available to go out and, you know, invest in some of this. You know, our people, we have a lot of needs, you know, trying to, you know, get it back, money back up to the tribe, continuing to grow our business. So, you know, those grants are very, you know, very effective way to get, you know, that pre-work done, that pre-development, you know, allow us, you know, kind of a, you know, that safety net, if you will. Hey, let's take a deep dive look in this, and, you know, we're not gonna, you know, spend $250,000 and not have, you know, potentially a project there that could have went elsewhere. So, you know, that along with, you know, grants coming on the, you know, for operations afterward, you know, have been, you know, again, the reason this project is alive today.
And what kind of capital, I mean, what's next? What kind of capital do you need going forward? What's the next step?
So we'll be looking, you know, obviously to continue here operations. We're going to be looking at developing a processing facility on that. You know, we continue its needs out at the ranch, expanding the herd. We'll probably be looking at different sites for different herds on this. You know, it's a 28,000 acre ranch, which is, you know, right on the Nebraska South Dakota border. So right in the sandhills. You know, it's not flat prairie land, but, you know, looking for additional locations, you know, within the boundaries of our reservation on Lakota land, and bringing in a more you know, more herd, which, you know, that's kind of been I would say almost one of the easier parts of people wanting to donate, including the federal government, you know, other private organizations doing that and looking at. And then obviously, you know, this isn't the only thing we do, you know, getting into other aspects of, you know, developing, you know, a new community, a lot of stuff. You know, we're looking to take what we've done here and put it into other projects as well.
Terrific. Let's just stick around for the conversation if you can. But let's bring in Chrystel from Oweesta. And Chrystel, I just want to acknowledge at the beginning the work you've done in Maui and the sort of the suffering and the challenges there. I don't know if there's anything you can share about that, but there's obviously a lot of Native Hawaiians who are in need right now. So maybe you could just bring us up to date.
Yeah, we've been very fortunate as an intermediary. So just a brief introduction. My name is Chrystel Cornelius. I'm the CEO of Oweesta Corporation, and we are the longest standing Native intermediary in the nation. So we have been serving Indian country and our Native CDFIs from the inception, essentially, of the CDFI field, and working in Indigenous communities. That obviously includes Hawaii and Alaska. We just provided our largest loan ever to a group in Hawaii. It was a $3 million loan, 2% interest, 10 years to really help propel their housing efforts and building housing efforts within the community, in which they're going to be able to leverage that $3 million into a $20 million project. So really proud of that. But specifically to Maui, we were very fortunate, and we do very well in a fundraising effort and have, you know, quite a bit of net assets. So we have immediately dedicated $750,000 to 3 organizations that are directly helping Indigenous Hawaiians in Maui. So that comes in the support of, number one, hiring immediate staff to help thousands, if not, you know, individuals qualify for FEMA. So when we look at, you know, we're giving money to these measures, where is it going? There's much more needed than, obviously, we need clothes, we need, you know, the emergency essentials, but in looking long-term, how are we going to replace? We've got homes gone. We have got actually a huge, and I've changed my vernacular, houseless population in Hawaii, and a majority of those are Native Hawaiians. Now we have you know, added to that extreme discrepancy and disparity just of policy, you know, in all honesty. So really proud to be supporting that measure, and we're probably going to be committing more funding based on what's needed as this progresses, because as we see an influx of emergency support, and talking about catalytic capital a lot, you know, we've got United Way that's going to come in. 100 million, I think, was just dedicated by Bezos, correct, to help with some of these efforts. But how this is going to be delineated, and more so to our most marginalized communities, Oweesta's work and our Indigenous Native Hawaiians work really are reaching that target market through the crisis and through what is going to be you know, years of repositioning, rebuilding, and individuals having to build their lives up from, you know, essentially nothing again. So very proud to be able to do that.
Well, thank you for all of that. You kind of are the let's just go to the intermediaries question. You're kind of the intermediaries for the intermediaries, in a sense, and helping the CDFIs get set up and financed and whatnot. And maybe just describe a little bit about CDFIs. I fell into a trap of using acronyms: community development financial institutions, and just describe how that works, and also what's maybe different about native CDFIs than the broader set of them.
Perfect. So as I indicated, Oweesta has been working with our native CDFI industry from inception. We were created initially as a program under our former parent company, First Nations Development Institute, to be a capital arm to Indian country. Then fortuitously, the CDFI fund under the Clinton administration was created, and there's a permanent set aside for Native communities to build their own financial institutions. This was imperative because if you look at the landscape of Native communities, most of our tribes have been located in very rural, remote areas. We are outside a footprint for any conventional funding. So we don't have banks necessarily setting up shop in our communities. Predatory lending, you know, for many years was the only outlet for capital other than, you know, using your own credit. And we were in financial deserts. So the importance and what we have seen within the past 25 years of this industry, Native CDFIs are the economic engines and pillars of their communities, hands down. So when we see an individual that wants to repair their assets, they want to climb the upward mobility ladder of financial stability, there's no other organization or programs that are doing this for Indigenous peoples than CDFIs. And then we also look at the beauty of CDFIs, and this is a prerequisite for all of us in the industry, of providing that capacity building in conjunction with finances. That has created one of the strongest, if not the strongest markets. We are one of the strongest emerging markets in the nation. So in looking at, you know, we have 64 certified CDFIs. We actually have 71, and we'll have that number come back up again. But unfortunately, during COVID, a lot of CDFIs were not able to get audits, which is a prerequisite for certification. So, and the CDFI fund has certification closed right now. So brief issue looking at that. We have about 25 to 30 emerging CDFIs, meaning tribal communities that are getting to the point of certification. They have created private sector business. They are the platform for entrepreneurship. They're the platform for home ownership. So the importance of these organizations has been instrumental, and it's been instrumental in the economic growth of these communities where they're located. And Oweesta, what's really exciting about us in the field and why now, we for many, many years were the only intermediary that are working really on behalf of Native communities. And we tended, and still do, tend to be the first investor directly in these Native CDFIs. So they meet their target market. But we've seen throughout the years more intermediaries which we're assisting come into existence. So we have the Indian Collective, we have a Keepton who is looking at, they're the largest agricultural lender for Indian country. We've got the Native CDFI network that's also looking at becoming an intermediary. And we've also got coalitions of Native CDFIs coming together, really leveraging their balance sheets and coming to levels of sophistication to really ingest this capital. And we can say as an intermediary, the need for capital, and there's so much somewhat misconception about what is the scale in Indian country, that is a complete facade. A great example is Oweesta itself. When I came to Oweesta, we had 2 loan products. We've developed that out into 5 based on the need of our CDFIs, and we really are reflective of what our community needs are. So when I look at our success is not our success. Our success is our Native CDFI's success. We have revolved over $70 million in Indian country, and we've only had 1 loan default. I made that loan. It was $10,000 and they paid back $7,000, right? So my default rate is still, and when you look at how our Native CDFIs perform, we outperform banks. And looking at catalytic capital, what is that? For us, catalytic capital is number 1, invest in our communities directly. I mean, just looking at that instance, we are more than ready for the injection of all sorts of capital. We've done 2 really innovative projects that we're very proud of. We put together the first of its kind, $10 million capital aggregate pool, which allowed CDFIs to get larger amounts of money, which they needed. So $1 million up to 1.5, 10-year money, very low interest rates. We developed that in 2018, brought the capital stack together in 2019, and that's been fully deployed. I also want to note before I talk about our other capital pool that I thought it was a really good enlightenment of, catalytic capital can be investments, but the grant and the equity money that allows especially marginalized communities and especially Native communities the ability to leverage additional funding, it's imperative. So for our $10 million pool, I could have not made that capital stack unless Northwest Area Foundation, who is a great supporter of Indian country in their 8-state region, they provided me $1 million, $1 million grant, which was to act as a cash loan loss reserve. That made other investors feel very comfortable in coming back in. And within the course of 7 months, we put together $10 million.
Perfect example of catalytic capital.
Yes. And our other, which we're extremely proud of as well, we were developing a model initially thought to be a 15 million, 15-year additional capital pool, because a lot of our CDFIs and a lot of our tribal membership are looking to be homeowners. And the CDFI is the only measure of capital availability for mortgages. So as this demand has increased, our CDFIs are meeting that need, creating these loan products, and a lot are already providing mortgages. So we thought, okay, a lot of our CDFIs, they're still not able to sell what's considered a little bit of unconventional mortgages to the secondary market. So Fannie's not buying them up, Freddie's not buying them up. We've been talking for years in this measure to have that happen. So we said, okay, we're going to put together a $15 million, 15-year capital fund to act as this market. Then COVID hit. So we were like, oh my goodness, we reached out to the field and asked, what do you need? They came back with an immediate $180 million need. We couldn't satisfy that as much as we would love to, but we ended up putting together a $36 million capital fund, which was the Native American COVID Relief and Recovery Fund. A lot of our CDFIs, over 28 that participated in this capital, they did use it for emergency funding, but they were also able to use large amounts of capital, again, over $1 million, 15 years, to help with their home ownership and larger entrepreneurship endeavors. Because as was noted, when you're doing your asset liability management or really looking at growth in our Native communities, a small amount short-term capital really just keeps you stymied. So if you're really wanting to be able to look long-term and invest long-term, that long-term capital is essentially needed, and especially at lower costs. We pride ourselves. I have over a $50 million portfolio, and I make a 1.1 spread on that portfolio by design. So I take in money low. My clients, which are our CDFIs, get a very lower rate to where our end user is getting lent out before par. So we make that very accessible to our CDFIs. Obviously, we have different revenue models for our own organization, which that evens out, but you'll find Native CDFIs as well, even in the midst of economic downturns. We don't act as conventional banking institutions and raise rates based on what's going on in the market. No, we look at capital in a measure of having it open, having it available, and having it affordable to communities to really grow assets. So we are so just proud to be in our position to work in, measures with different, investors and be able to get capital directly to our Native communities.
Terrific, Chrystel. I think if anybody had any doubts of whether there was places to put capital to work, you just answered that. So thank you so much. Let's open this up now to everybody, including the audience. If you have questions, I know some of them have been flying by in the chat. And Kate and John, I don't know whether Brett is still with us, but Clay, I think you're still here. But also, I think Heather Fleming, an old friend, has joined. And Heather, congratulations on getting the center open in Tuba City. Are you with us, Heather? There you are. Great to see you. Isaac, you got to unmute Heather. Wait a minute, Heather. Just hold on. You're still muted. Isaac's gonna unmute you. So we made it a little harder to come in. Isaac, do you have?
Can you check your sound, because you're unmuted on our side?
Or maybe you are unmuted, but we still can't hear you. So Heather, hold on a second. Let's figure this out. Another one who I think was involved also with the report and has a perspective, Jen Astone.
Yeah, thanks, David. This has been a great conversation, and it's so wonderful to hear from all of these incredible Native leaders about the work they're doing. And I think one of the untold stories of all of this is that there are a lot of investors and foundations and others that are in partnership doing this work. And they're really not telling their story to their peers. So there's this sort of drag effect. It's not only are there invisible, the invisible economy in Native country, but also there's invisible philanthropists doing this work, the really hard work of making patient, low cost, long-term loans. And they're really not touting their story. And part of the joy of doing this work was really talking to those foundations and philanthropists and investors about how they're doing this work, why they're doing this work, and how excited they are. I just feel like there's just so much opportunity for investors to follow their peers and to build stronger coalitions and to move more money into Indian country. So that's really my challenge to the field. And, curious if any of the speakers have any suggestions or ideas about how they've been navigating these relationships which are often, very cultivated one by one. How do we bring this to a wider audience and organize the philanthropic and investor community to be braver and more bold and to recognize, the incredible activity that's going on in Indian country?
Great, thank you, Jen. Heather, I think we got you now. Are you there?
I am, yes.
Ah, great.
I was saying before, I think it's for the best because I had just taken a huge bite of peanut butter. So it's better now. It's better now. So thank you, David. I appreciate it.
I know you've got the center open in Tuba City there. one of the things that have always thought about when we've chatted is sort of just the opportunities for kind of bread and butter businesses in Indian country that serve, community needs and can grow. And one of those aspects is just having the kind of business support. So tell us a little bit just what you're up to there in the center and what kinds of businesses you're helping.
Sure, thank you. So I'm the executive director of a nonprofit on the Navajo Nation called Change Labs. And we are part of what I hope is a growing movement of Native-led entrepreneurship support organizations, specifically across the Southwest, that are working within our communities to grow our business owners. And the way that we're doing that is fourfold. First and foremost, we run a business incubator, and we're putting a lot of thought into rethinking that, actually, but it's one of the big things that we're doing for now. The second is lending, trying to get dollars out into our community, and that is where the biggest opportunity lies, I would say, as well. I think you guys recently featured some of the SSBCI work that we're doing with the Navajo Nation. That's going to bring nearly $100 million to Navajo business owners from U.S. Treasury, and with the match that's required, that's nearly a $180 million investment in Navajo small businesses over the next 10 years. We're happy to be leading that work with the Navajo Division of Economic Development. But we also provide
SSBCI is part of some federal funding that's now available.
Yes, the State Small Business Credit Initiative, which previously was limited to 50 states, now includes all tribes. And I'm going to get my numbers wrong here, but if I remember correctly, I think it was like 200 and something tribes applied for, or not applied, but submitted letters of intent that they were going to take their funds. Navajo being one of the largest, we have an $89 million allotment, but each tribe is getting several millions of dollars, or maybe some of the smaller tribes may not be millions, but each tribe is getting money to run loan guarantee programs, venture capital programs. And there's a press release that went out last month. President Biden announced, I think it was the first 6 tribes and consortiums that had received their funds or that had successfully submitted their applications. And half of them had proposed venture capital funds. So it's exciting because I'm just anticipating that there's going to be all of these venture funds out there soon that are specifically for Native communities. And it's kind of an unprecedented time. We're working on one too with Navajo Nation, but these are conversations that have never been had within our tribe. So it's exciting just to see this change happening so quickly.
You mentioned that there's a match requirement, and I know that you guys have been working on your own proposal and these different funding streams that you're looking to unlock, with your own venture fund, as you said, with a couple of different lending facilities. Where are you looking to tap matching funding?
Yeah, it has to be a private capital match. And right at the moment, we have partnerships with local credit unions. We're proposing a partnership with Native American Bank, but really it can come for a venture fund where we're exploring now who those limited partners might be, what type of investors might be interested in investing in Navajo small businesses. So each tribe's allocation, they're allowed to use it specifically for their tribal members. So Change Labs, we would use our allocation specifically for Navajo business owners. But it creates an interesting constraint, I think, for prospective investors and financial institutions who want to provide that capital match for these programs. And really, to me, the opportunity from an economic perspective and a community change perspective is enormous. It really is unprecedented. I feel like we've been using that word a lot in the last 4 years, but this to me just blows my mind when I think about the significant lack of underinvestment in businesses in our community, and then just to see this all coming all at once. It's intimidating, but also fun at the same time.
Terrific. Let's just broaden it out. And again, Kate and John and anybody else who has overarching thoughts. I mean, one of the things that's come through to me in all of this reporting that we've done is sort of the development of an Indian country financial ecosystem that kind of has its own its own shape. It's not a sort of adjunct to the sort of broader. I mean, it's obviously got ties, but it's kind of got its own shape and feel, and it feels like there's now kind of critical mass there, and maybe some infusion of other money, as you say. But is that wishful thinking, or is that really happening, Kate?
You know, thanks for the question, and I'm so glad to say it's really happening. It's there. You know, we heard from Heather, we hear from Chrystel that the ecosystem is here, and you know, one of the really poignant things about catalytic capital is it really seeks impact, right, along a number of different metrics, financial success, but of course, economic, social. And what you need is to get in front of the folks who see the problems and see the solutions and are creating big visions, right? It's the native intermediaries who are doing that, who have that trusted relationship and who can build that capital. And I think really the opportunities are here to create, because of this ecosystem that exists in Indian country and that's growing in Indian country, we can finally, we're talking a lot about this capital constrained environment. It's time to stretch. We can stretch now. We can create consistent capital for Native entrepreneurs through that ecosystem in Indian country. And I would invite investors and impact investors to think about how they can stretch. How can you stretch your learning inside of your organization to provide grants and investments? What does it look like to give a loan guarantee? What does it look like to do PRIs, MRIs? You know, what can you do to give a recoverable grant? You know, like, let's stretch our capacity because Indian country is growing so quickly. So how can we really create that match? And I really think that, you know, what we hear from entrepreneurs today and what we show through our interviews with so many different people is there's a way for all investors to step in. It's just a matter of figuring out what best suits you. But Indian country is here and that ecosystem is here, and it's just about finding the way that you can step in.
That's terrific. That's actually tees up a question I had for you, John, which is, but both this conversation and also the report itself has some kind of challenges for the practice of catalytic capital as well. I wonder what, you know, you funded the research. I wonder what you learned from it for the catalytic capital work more broadly.
Yeah, it's such a good question, and I would be remiss if I didn't just note the passion from Kate and the important call to action, and you heard that across all the speakers here, and I just would plus one that at 1,000%, and I'm really excited about what's happening in this particular sector. I also want to note, Jen, your, I think, important question, which is to really try to identify action-oriented areas of engagement. And David, I think this speaks to your question as well. And as I was listening to the conversation, there were many things that grabbed my attention, but maybe four key things that I wanted to pull up and just note. And one, you heard multiple folks talk about the need for grants, and Kate just spoke about it twice, both at the beginning and here as well. You also heard Chrystel talk about the really important capacity building work that Oweesta is doing, and I don't think that can be emphasized enough, how that grants are a really critical element to all of this. Kate talked about what I love the term right relationship, and what she terms as right relationship, and that's something that we at MacArthur are really trying to understand, and I'm trying to move up the learning curve as much as I can on that, and but I just think that's so important, and to kind of move at the pace of trust here, recognizing the financial trauma that's inherent in a lot of these discussions. But that was I think a really key point. A third point that really just jumped out at me that I don't think could be emphasized enough was the need for first movers. And Brett, I think, spoke really passionately or really well about the way that Candide was an early investor and helped kind of seed the development of their work. And so for investors who are listening in on this, I don't think you can overemphasize the importance of being first in on some of these really important efforts. And then lastly, the need for intermediation. And I think that just jumps out of the conversation. You heard it over and over again. Again, just listening to Chrystel and all the great work that they're doing at Oweesta, I think it really speaks to the power of that. But then also with these federal dollars coming online, whether it be through SSBCI or other forms, the importance of intermediated vehicles that can help absorb that capital and move it in a way where decision making is happening within indigenous communities, I think is really critical as well. So those were just a few insights that I just really appreciate the conversation, and a few things that I grabbed from both this and the report.
I think I was remiss, and I always think of my mother who says she loves our work, but she doesn't always understand the words, that an intermediary is, got a lot of syllables. So it just means all of the kinds of connective tissue and the organizations. Oweesta is obviously key example of that, but all of the funds, lenders, VC vehicles, other vehicles that can take capital in and also then distribute it out, and as you said, with right relationships and all that. So that's what intermediaries means, if anybody was wondering why it keeps coming up. It does seem to be one of the, to answer my initial question of sort of why now, that this set of intermediaries has grown up into a real ecosystem. I think federal funding maybe another answer to the why now. I think the general sort of racial reckoning the country's been through maybe plays some role, but it really does feel like there's some energy. Jessica's been finding so many examples and good stories, and will continue. We hope that you all will send us any stories or themes or organizations you're working with. Help us amplify your work. We're coming up on the top of the hour. As we said, we'll keep the conversation going for anybody who wants to stick around, but obviously other folks might have other things they need to get to, so feel free to leave without worry. One thing that came through, Zulema was putting on our subscription offer, so I'd be remiss not to point you to that. But there does seem to be a gender lens. I know it came through in the report. The importance of Native women leadership and Native women entrepreneurs. So I wonder whether anybody has any thoughts on that.
Well, I will have to say yes. And there's some incredibly powerful Native women on this call, just kind of showing the leadership that exists in Indian country from many women. And Native Women Lead in particular has put together a number of statistics about the power that Native entrepreneurs and Native women entrepreneurs have grown. And I believe it's something like in 10 years between 97 and 2017, Native American and Alaska Native women-owned businesses grew by 200%. And that's not slowing down. These are women who know what the solutions are, and they're women who are ready for capital. And so it's just an incredibly important thing to point out, and I appreciate it that we really can deliver consistent capital to these women to seed their entrepreneurial visions in their communities.
And just to chime in really quick on that, this was a couple of years ago, but there was also an outside study that was done on the Native CDFI field by, I forget the consultant's name, I'll remember it, but essentially they were really interested because our CDFI industry is over 1,100. There is a CDFI in every state from 1 million in assets to 1 billion in assets. So doing small business lending, larger infrastructure projects, and holistically, this is a man-driven industry. It's, banking, but different. But when you get into the Native CDFI sector, which is why they did a study, we are over 90% women-led. And they are saying, how is this possible? One of which I thought was really interesting takeaway, which we kind of know innately as Native people, but women have always been accepted in positions of leadership within our Indigenous communities. So it's not odd for us to have, whether you call it matriarchs or very strong women that are, chairmen of their tribe or leading organizations. So I thought culturally, that was interesting. Even though we know it was quantified through data, and the rest of the industry, as in CDFIs, predominantly are men-led, but quite a different industry among our little CDFI field, which I think is kind of cool.
I think one of the things that stood out to me too when I was looking at some of the Native Women Lead research was also the economic contribution of women-led businesses, and that the majority of households are women are primary breadwinners. So I think that threads through from the intermediary level down to the end business owners and at the household level as well, right? So
I also wanted to call out another gap that's been pointed out to me, or an opportunity, I think is really the way to frame it, which is sort of a whole category of project developers, contractors, that can kind of access and be borrowers, I suppose, for CDFIs for different kinds of projects. And I know people have said, that sometimes Native companies don't have the bonding required to get a certain kind of contract or what have you. And there's a whole kind of technical assistance and sort of capacity development at a very sort of bread and butter level of business development. I know, maybe Heather, you're working on that, and others as well. But I just want people to remember sort of it's not all, venture funded, unicorns. It's nuts and bolts kind of businesses.
Yeah.
Are there other questions and comments from the audience? I haven't had really a chance to scroll through the chat because we've been so engaged here. But if anybody wants to put their hand up or just chime in,
Jen, I wanted to actually bring you on for a second, because I know that
I think maybe do put your hand up.
Jen, I wanted to see actually if you just wanted to mention the webinar that you guys have coming up, and the funds that are being presented.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica. So next week, the Transformative 25 is holding a webinar, and you'll hear again from Brett Isaac of Navajo Power, but we also have Christy Finstel of the ONAC Fund. The Oklahoma Native Assets Coalition is starting a new fund. Liz Gamboa and Jake Henry Foreman of IndigiDAO, which is a new initiative out of New Mexico Community Capital. And then David Cobb will be talking about the Wyatt tribe, the Goots Lakawuth Hiwek Fund, and it'll be moderated by Vanessa Roanhorse, which many of you know, Roanhorse Consulting and Native Women Lead. So we're very excited. It's next Wednesday at 11, and I put the details, or you can email me about how to reach the webinar. So thank you.
And we'll put a shout out in the brief as well. So if you read, if you want to look there, we'll get, oh, there it is. Well, again. Well, this has been terrific conversation. Thank you to all of the participants and all of the speakers. Unless somebody wants to have a last word, which I'd welcome. We'll let folks go on. So kind of going. All right. Anything for you to add? Should we let folks go on?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I may be frozen now, so maybe not sure what's going on here, but that might be a good way to end it in any event. So thanks to everybody, and we'll see you on our next call. We'll see you in the brief. So thanks very much.
Thank you all.
Y'all take good care.
Thanks everyone.
Well.